That Gracie shit's no joke, though. Them motherfucker, that family.
They changed the world.
The world.
South America, the land of samba, soccer, and a fighting tradition that not many know about.
Nobody knew what Gracie Jiu Jitsu was. After all my father is done, my family is done in Brazil, nobody knew. I grew up training. I want to fight. I want to do it. It's my job to win. He trained to win. I didn't train to lose.
I think it's such a practical art. It's so usable. That's what I like about it.
Anything is possible. You just have to have discipline. There's a lot of tough guys out there, but without discipline, they're not going to stay on top forever.
What the Gracies did in the late 80s was bring their family form of jiu-jitsu to the U.S., where their style helped create a whole new phenomenon, ultimate fighting.
The Gracie family is the most important family in the history of martial arts.
The family you're about to meet, the Gracies, are masters of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They're the Kennedys of the tap-out, the Barrymores of the octagon, the Rockefellers of the chokehold.
1966, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Born on the 12th of December, one of 9 sons of Jiu-Jitsu Grandmaster Helio Gracie, Royce learned Jiu-Jitsu from his father and older brothers, Rorion, Helson, Hickson, and Hoyler, from a young age.
And all of us were practically, as I said, since little kids, as soon as we start walking, we have a kimono on and start rolling around the mat, even though we are not aware of what we're learning.
It was to have all your heroes around you all the time, all the people that I admire, they live in my house.
First competing at the age of 8 and teaching classes by the age of 14, it became apparent very early on that Royce would follow in the footsteps of his forefathers and bring their legacy to new heights. In 1984, at the age of 18, Royce was awarded his black belt. However, his competition debut at black belt did not go as planned, as he was submitted in the first round.
Ó, e saindo certo, ele tá tentando virar de barriga pra frente, só que tava muito justa a posição. Ih, vai dormir, dormiu, cara, que loucura. Aí o Schwei tá balançando, ih, invasão de ringue pra acordar o rapaz.
Você sentiu ele amolecendo ali?
Não, tô vendo agora, por isso que eu tô tão empolgado, primeira vez, não acreditei aí. A luta que eu esperava que ia ser 1, 2, 3 horas em 5 minutos. Meus companheiros de treino, tenho que agradecer muito as pessoas que confiaram em mim, porque até no meu próprio time teve um rastro. E agradecer ao meu grande mestre Carson Gracie, que sempre me apoiou.
So it seemed that maybe competing in BJJ wasn't his strong suit, but Royce didn't give up. Years prior, Rorion, the eldest son of Helio Gracie, visited America with dreams of bringing the Gracie name and their jiu-jitsu to California. And by the early 1980s, Rorion had enlisted the help of his younger brothers, Hoyler, Hickson, and the young Royce, to make this dream become reality. However, they would soon find out that making it in America was far harder than they first anticipated.
It was tough times. Fortunately, it didn't last long, but just enough to be, to give me a taste of what it could be, how difficult things can get.
But through their perseverance, Rorion and his brothers were able to establish a successful academy. But gaining acceptance from the American martial arts community proved to be a difficult challenge. As early as the 1960s, and especially in the 1970s, American culture was deeply influenced by Kung Fu. From television to movies and even comic books, Kung Fu reigned supreme, with Bruce Lee, who many consider the most influential martial artist of all time, at the forefront. Releasing the first Hollywood Kung Fu movie, Enter the Dragon, in 1973, and the iconic movie Game of Death, featuring American basketball star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in 1978. There were even songs about Kung Fu, like Kung Fu Fighting by Carl Douglas, 1974.
People since the Bruce Lee era have been conditioned to think that fighting is punching and kicking. But now with the, the increase of movies and action adventure things and TV programs and so forth, they are realizing more and more that what's presented on TV and on the movies is just more of a demonstration type thing than a real effective fighting system.
Going into the 1980s and riding the wave of popularity from the prior decade, karate would also see massive growth, with movie releases like the Karate Kid franchise, which began in 1984, as well as the rise of action stars like Chuck Norris, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Steven Seagal. So a grappling art like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu would have a really hard time standing out, as many Americans tended to discount the grappling arts in favor of the more flashier and visually impressive striking arts. The 1960s gave Americans a preview of what would later become mixed martial arts in the Gene LaBelle Judo versus Milo Savage boxing match in 1963, showcasing one of the first striking versus grappling matchups, but it was far too ahead of its time, and it would be many decades before an audience would be receptive to the concept of mixing different martial arts in a competitive setting. In the meantime, the Gracies continued teaching, with many of their students having learned martial arts before, and when these students returned to their own martial arts schools, they would often tell their instructors about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. However, some of these instructors didn't like that their students were becoming interested in a new martial art.
And little by little, they would bring their friends for the first class, and people love it, and the word kept getting around. It didn't take long, until some people started saying, hey, Jorge, my former martial arts instructor, he wants to challenge you. He thinks Jiu-Jitsu is not that good.
And would later go on to challenge the Gracies and their students to a fight in order to prove that their own style was better, something that the Gracies were very familiar with. The first Gracie challenge was issued by founder of the sport Carlos Gracie, older brother to Helio Gracie, as early as the 1920s in order to promote Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and show that it was superior to other styles of martial arts, with the matches typically featuring a smaller Gracie versus a larger, more athletic-looking opponent.
Our jiu-jitsu is like what the samurais do without the weapons. We perfect the technique so much that even the weak people like me and anybody else can benefit from it.
A concept we'll see later reused with the inception of the first UFC. During these challenges, the Gracies will go on to fight martial artists of different styles, including boxing, judo, karate, and wrestling, with notable challenges such as Helio Gracie versus Kimura, 1951, Fada Academy versus Gracie Academy, and Helio versus Valdemar Santana, 1952.
It became a quest for my family to find out which style of martial arts is the best.
Back to the present, and the Gracie brothers are being challenged by the American martial arts instructors. However, Rorion and his brothers grew up watching their father fight in Valtudo, or anything goes competitions, so they make quick work of the challengers. But these challenges would also have a lingering effect on Rorion, who would see this as an opportunity to promote Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and more importantly, his family style, much like his uncle Carlos did so many decades before.
One day I said, you know what, I can't be doing this a million times, so that's when I decided to do a videotape called the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Action.
Videotaping the matches in exchange for a cash prize if the challengers win. These matches would later be turned into the Gracies in Action documentary, which would be used to fight against the American perception of striking martial arts being better than grappling arts. During the mid-1980s, Chuck Norris, a famous American actor and martial artist, traveled to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil for vacation. When he first encountered the Gracie family,
and I went to their school. And I met Mr. Gracie, the father. I met Rickson Gracie, who was the world champion at that time, and Royce Gracie.
Chuck was so impressed by the Gracies that he would later start training under Carlos Machado, student under Helio and Rickson, and cousin to IBJJF founder Carlos Gracie Jr. With this connection to Chuck Norris, allowed the Gracies to become more accepted in the martial arts community and opened many doors.
On ground fighting, the seminar conducted on Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was a big hit among the attendees, and these kinds of seminars give one an opportunity to learn skills from teachers of different styles. Now to the Gracies.
In 1987, Rorion became the technical advisor for the blockbuster hit movie Lethal Weapon. In 1988, Chuck Norris invited the Gracies to hold a seminar with his school, and in 1989, Rorion, alongside his brothers Royce, Rickson, and Hoyler, opened the first Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy in Torrance, California. The Gracie family had the pedigree, they had the fighters, and now they finally had the right connections. What was once a grassroots movement was soon on its way to becoming mainstream, with the help of student John Milius, American film director best known for his work on Conan the Barbarian, 1982, Red Dawn, 1984, and co-creating the primetime Emmy Award-winning television series, Rome, 2005. Rorion was able to meet up with and eventually become business partners with Art Davie, a business executive and entrepreneur.
I had gotten commitment early on from Horion that I was going to be the matchmaker and booker.
And together, they would go on to create the Ultimate Fighting Championship, otherwise known as the UFC. Building upon the concept of the Gracie Challenge, pitting different martial artists in competition against one another, the UFC was unique in that it had no rules, no gloves, and no time limits.
Champion, be forewarned, there are no rules, no judges' scores, and no time limits.
Originally going by the name of the War of the Worlds, luckily that name fell through.
There was two. There was WOW Promotions, and WOW Promotions came from War of the Worlds because Art had named the whole competition War of the Worlds.
Oh.
And then Semaphore Entertainment Group changed it to the Ultimate Fighting Championship.
The idea was simple enough. It would be an 8-man, single elimination tournament in which the fights could only end by submission, knockout, or corner throwing in the towel.
We're going to get right down to it. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, no holds barred. Anything goes. Just no eye gouges and no biting.
Leaving the winner to be crowned as the Ultimate Fighter. Add on to this its iconic ring in the shape of an octagon, and the first UFC was ready to take place on the 12th of November, 1993.
But tonight, the big storm on everyone's mind is taking place indoors at the McNichols Sports Arena, the site of tonight's landmark martial arts event. 8 of the deadliest fighters in the world will meet in a no-holds-barred combat to determine who is the Ultimate Fighting Champion.
Things were running smoothly enough, but the biggest issue for the Gracies was in fact who would go on to represent the family. Hickson Gracie, born on the 21st of November, 1959, was the third eldest son of Helio Gracie, and during the 1980s and 90s was widely considered to be the best fighter in the family.
And at one point I finally said, Horion, who are you going to put in from Gracie Jiu Jitsu in the tournament?
But due to his physical nature, Horion thought it better to pick the scrawny Royce Gracie, weighing in at only 175 pounds or 79 kilograms, to represent the family.
It's very humbling, the whole experience.
But here's what's even crazier. Hickson, Royce's brother, Royce will tell you he's 10 times better than him.
Yeah.
Hickson would do to Royce what Royce would do to other black belts.
Royce would go on to easily defeat the strikers he faced, but his biggest challenge was yet to come in the form of shoot fighting expert Ken Shamrock. Born Kenneth Wayne Shamrock on the 11th of February 1964, he would later be named the world's most dangerous man and considered by many to be the #1 mixed martial artist in the world.
The world's most dangerous man!
Getting his start in professional wrestling and shoot fighting, a combat sport originating in Japan during the 1970s, it was known for its realistic or full contact moves.
I've always wanted to make sure that everybody remembered my name.
Shamrock was a force to be reckoned with, considering his extensive grappling arsenal, including heel hooks, which he used in the prior match. However, Shamrock's style was much like luta livre, which the Gracies were very familiar with. Luta livre, or Brazilian submission wrestling, is a martial art that combines catch wrestling with kosen judo and ground strikes with the feet, knees, and elbows. And its history dates all the way back to Rio de Janeiro in 1927, when its founder, Euclides Tatu Hatem, a Brazilian of Lebanese descent, began teaching and experimenting with his own techniques. During this period, Tatu and his students would go on to have several challenge matches with the Gracie family, Tatu himself defeating George Gracie in 1940, and his student Euclides Pereira defeating Carlson Gracie in 1968.
He dominated George Gracie and ultimately submitted him with a reversed double wrist lock.
So the stage was set. Sporting his iconic white gi and having earlier defeated journeyman boxer Art Jimerson, the greatest threat to the Gracies was undoubtedly Ken Shamrock.
Ken Shamrock thought it was going to be an easy win. He was in great shape, and when we saw him, we were like, my God, that Captain America, who knows, he's going to knock his head off.
With Royce eventually coming out on top. In the finals, Royce would meet Savate world champion Gerard Gordeau, winning the fight with the rear naked choke.
It's over. That was just, Royce is not letting go. He wants to make sure the referee sees that this is over. That is the power of jiu-jitsu in action.
Later being awarded the title of the Ultimate Fighting Champion and a prize of $50,000 USD, or over $100,000 in today's money.
That's what I thought. The whole world of martial arts just changed. Like they did it. They did it.
Royce would later go on to win the UFC 2 and UFC 4. With this, the Gracies had succeeded in their family's mission of promoting Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but they were more successful than they could have ever imagined. In a time before the internet, the Gracies had produced viral content in their Gracie in Action videos and VHS copies of the first UFCs, inspiring the next generation of martial artists and spreading BJJ all over the world.